What happens when an Amish bride fails the pre-wedding inspection? I was tested 3 times. The basin water is cold, colder than I expected for July. My knees are pressed into the pine floor of Sister Miriam's back room, and she is behind me, lifting my hair off my neck with 2 fingers like she's checking a horse for ticks. I'm 17. I'm getting married in 9 days, and nobody has told me what this is yet. She runs her thumb along the bone behind my ear, then down. I hear her breathing through her nose, slow, the way Mama breathes when she's deciding something. The kettle on the stove 3 rooms away starts to whistle and nobody moves to take it off. That's the part I remember most, the whistling, going and going, like the house itself was trying to warn me. Stand up, Christina. I stand. My shift sticks to the backs of my legs. Turn. I turn. The floorboard under my left heel, the one with the dark knot shaped like a comma, doesn't creak. It always creaks. Not that day. She tells me I failed. She doesn't say what. She tells me to come back Tuesday. There will be a second inspection. And if I fail that one, I was tested 3 times before my wedding. 3. And one person tried. My cousin Hannah. She got as far as the word body before her mother walked in. Quick pause. My name is Christina, and this is Christina Amish Home. If these stories stay with you, if they make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it's the reason I can keep telling them. Tell me in the comments what was the first rule about your own body that you remember learning without anyone ever saying it out loud. And if you want to go further, a super chat or a membership, that's you telling me these voices are worth hearing. That keeps this going. Now back to what happened. In our district, and I want to be careful here, because I know not every Amish community does this, and I won't speak for anyone, but the people I grew up with, there was a thing called the bride's inspection. Nobody called it that out loud. The older women called it the sitting or the visit. It came down from a reading of purity laws older than any of us, stitched together from Old Testament verses about brides being brought clean to their husbands, and the bishop's wife's interpretation of what clean meant. It meant your body. It meant a woman who had borne children would put her hands on you and decide if you were ready. The paradigm bomb is this. The inspection wasn't about whether you'd been with a man. We all knew, none of us had. It was about whether your body could be managed, whether you would lie still, whether you flinched. Sister Miriam pinched the soft place above my hip once during that first sitting, hard, and watched my face. I didn't move. I thought that was the test. It wasn't, or maybe it was. I still don't know. The rule lived in the spaces between words. It lived in the way my Aunt Lydia stopped speaking when my mother walked into the room. It lived in the way the married women looked at the unmarried girls during Sunday singing kind, but with something underneath that I didn't have a word for then. I have a word for it now. It was pity. There was one time, I think I was 14, maybe 15, I asked Mama what the sitting was. We were snapping beans on the porch. She didn't look up. She just said, "You'll know when it's your turn." And the way she said your turn like it was a chore, like it was the chickens needing fed, I never asked again. That's how the rule taught itself, through her hands not stopping on the beans. His name was Eli Stoltzfus, and he had a chipped front tooth from a hay bale that fell wrong when he was 12, and the first time I saw him laugh, I thought, that one. We'd been promised 6 months. In our district, 6 months was long. Most girls met their husbands at a Sunday singing, said yes by the second buggy ride, and that was that. My older sister, Rebecca, pulled me aside 3 weeks before the wedding. She held both my hands. She looked at the dirt floor of the milk house, and she said 13 words. I counted them later. She said, "Just let him. It's quick. Don't cry until after he's asleep." 13. That was my wedding preparation, from the only person in the world I trusted with the truth. Eli didn't know either. I want you to understand that. He was 19, no, 20, because his birthday was in May and we married in June. His father had taken him out to the backfield 2 days before the wedding and told him something. I don't know what. Eli would never tell me. But I saw his face when he came back in for supper, and his hands were shaking and he couldn't look at his mother. Whatever his father said, it scared him too. We were two children. Two children being handed a thing nobody had named for us and being told to do it right the first time, in the dark, and never speak of it again. The night before the wedding, he found me by the spring house and he said, "Christina, are you scared?" And I said, "No," I lied. He said, "Me neither." And then we both stood there for a long time listening to the frogs. The days before the wedding were full of women and full of silence. The aunts came to help sew the wedding apron. They laughed about chickens and about Sarah Mass's terrible noodles and about the weather. They did not laugh about marriage. When my mother brought out the white cap I would wear, Aunt Lydia touched my shoulder and said, "Be a good wife now." That was it. Be a good wife. I waited for anyone to tell me what a wife was, what a wife did, what my body would be asked to do, and what it could refuse, and whether refusing was even a word that existed in our language. Nobody said any of it. The thing nobody tells you is that the silence isn't empty. The silence is full. It's full of everything they decided you didn't need to know. The room was upstairs, in the Dottie house behind Eli's parents' farm. One window, a kerosene lamp on the dresser, turned low, because his mother said low light was modest. The quilt on the bed was a Lone Star pattern in dark blue and cream, made by Eli's grandmother, and I remember thinking somebody's grandmother made this quilt for this exact night, and that is the strangest thing I have ever thought. My wedding dress was hung on a nail on the back of the door. Outside, a barn cat was crying, or fighting. I couldn't tell. The floor smelled like lemon oil. Eli was already in the room when I came up. He was sitting on the edge of the bed in his white shirt, still buttoned to the throat, and he was pulling at the seam of his left sleeve, over and over, like he was trying to unravel something only he could see. He stood up when I came in. He said hi, just hi, like we'd met at a sing. I stood by the dresser and I put my hand flat on the wood, because my knees were doing a thing I'd never felt them do before. He said, "Mama said to put out the lamp." I said, "Okay." Neither of us moved. He said, I don't know how this part goes," and my throat closed up so tight I couldn't answer him. My toes curled inside my stockings, and I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth so hard I tasted blood. I wanted to tell him that I didn't know either. I wanted to say, "Rebecca told me 13 words, and that was all." But in our community, you just don't. You don't admit you don't know. So I just nodded, and I sat down on the quilt beside him. And the cat outside kept crying. What happened next I will not draw for you. I won't, but I will tell you the shape of it. He was gentle. I need you to hear that. He was so gentle it almost hurt worse, because his gentleness had no map. He kept saying, is this okay? And I kept saying yes, because yes was the only word I had been given. His hand moved. I stopped breathing. He said, "I'm sorry." I said, "Don't be." I wanted to pull away and move closer at the same time, and I did not have language for either feeling, so I lay still the way Rebecca told me to. My jaw was so tight, I bit the inside of my cheek and didn't notice until I tasted copper. At one point he asked, "Are you crying?" And I said no. And I wasn't, not yet. I was somewhere above the quilt, watching a girl I used to be do a thing I hadn't agreed to because I hadn't known there was anything to agree to. After, he fell asleep fast. Boys do. The kerosene lamp had burned almost out, and the room smelled like wick and something else I didn't have a word for. I lay on my back, and I stared at the ceiling beam, the one with the iron hook, where someone, someday, would hang a cradle. I noticed the quilt had a loose thread near the star point closest to my hand. I pulled it. It came out 1/2 inch. I pulled it again and again. By morning there was a small pucker in the cream square where the thread used to be, and that was the only thing in the room that had changed shape that I had any say over. I went down to the kitchen at 4:30. I started the stove. I made coffee. My hands knew how to make coffee. My hands knew how to do everything that didn't matter. Neither of us understood that what happened in that room had a name. Neither of us understood that a body could say yes and a girl could say no, and both could be true at the same time. We didn't have the word consent. I want to be clear, we had the word sort of the way you have a word for a country you've never visited, but not for this, not for a marriage bed. Inside marriage, in our district, the word didn't apply because the wedding vows were assumed to have given a permanent answer to every question that would ever be asked of my body for the rest of my life. The bishop said it from the front of the room, 1 flesh, 2 words. That was the whole curriculum. Eli wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. He was doing exactly what he had been told a husband does, in exactly the way he had been told to do it, and his ignorance was as wide and as deep as mine. The community didn't accidentally fail to teach us. The not teaching was the teaching. There is a word I learned later, enculturation, and there is a phrase I learned later, coercive context, and there is a whole field of study about what happens to a girl's body when her body has never been told it belongs to her. I didn't know any of that yet. I just knew that for 9 days I'd been inspected by Sister Miriam, and for one night I'd been touched by a husband, and not one single human being in my life had asked me, even once, what I wanted. And I carried that. I carried that for a long time before I knew I was carrying it. By the 3rd month, I had a system. I would wash the supper dishes slower than I needed to, because the longer the dishes took, the closer Eli came to falling asleep in his chair by the lamp. If he was asleep when I came up, the night was mine. If he was awake, I'd unbraid my hair in the kitchen first, because the unbraiding took 11 minutes if I did it right, and 11 minutes was sometimes enough. I learned to breathe in a way that made my chest small. I learned to put my mind in the rafters and leave my body on the quilt. I would think about the bread starter on the counter, whether it had doubled, whether I'd need to feed it before morning. By the time I was 20, I could make a grocery list in my head, while my husband and I don't even know what to call what that was. I just know my hand shook for 3 days after our first anniversary, and I told Mama it was the cold. The women knew. They all knew. We just never said it where the words could land. We said it in the spaces between. There was a quilting bee at Sister Anna's the spring I turned 21. 6 of us around the frame. Anna was 40-something, her hands the color of pulled taffy from years of lye soap, and she was stitching a wedding ring pattern for her niece. Out of nowhere, without looking up, she said, "She's a quiet one, that girl." Mary Yoder, across the frame from her, said, "Quiet is good." And Anna said, "Quiet is what they want." 6 words. Nobody answered. The needles kept moving. I looked up and caught Anna's eye for half a second, and she gave me the smallest nod. Like a door opening 1 inch and then closing. I almost said it then. I almost said me too. But Mary's daughter Ruth came in with the lemonade pitcher, and the moment slid under the quilt and was gone. Anna lost a baby that summer. Her 4th. She came back to church 2 weeks later in a clean apron, and when the bishop's wife asked how she was, she said, "Fine, the Lord gives and takes." That night, my cousin Hannah told me we were sitting on the back steps shelling peas that Anna had asked the midwife, quietly, if there was a way to not have any more. The midwife told the bishop told Anna's husband, and the next Sunday, Anna sat in the front row with her eyes on the floor and didn't sing. That was the community's response mechanism. A woman who almost spoke was pulled back in by her own husband's hand on her shoulder during the hymn. Hannah whispered it to me, and then she said, "Don't tell anyone I told you." And I didn't. I carried that too. By our 4th year of marriage, I had a list in my head of 7 women I knew were carrying the same thing, and not one of us had ever said it out loud. I left when I was 26. That's a longer story, and I'll tell it. But the moment I'm thinking of right now happened 8 months after I left, in a public library in Lancaster on a Wednesday in the section labeled Health Women's. I was wearing jeans for the 2nd week of my life, and they still felt like a costume. I pulled a book off the shelf, pink and white cover, library tape on the spine, and I opened it to a page near the middle, and there was a diagram, just a diagram, labeled parts, arrows. Words I had never seen written down before, and underneath the diagram was a sentence that said, "Consent is ongoing, specific, and can be withdrawn at any time, including within marriage." I read it 3 times. I read it a 4th time. My knees went out from under me right there in the aisle, and I sat down on the carpet, and I put the book in my lap, and I made a sound I had never made before. The librarian came over. I think she thought I was sick. I wasn't sick. I had just met, for the first time in 26 years, the rules my own body had been operating under without my knowledge. I wasn't angry. That's what surprised me. I sat in my car in the library parking lot for an hour and a half, and the thing I felt wasn't anger. It was grief. Devastatingly sad. Sad for the girl in Sister Miriam's back room who didn't know she could say no to a stranger's hands on her body. Sad for the girl on the Lone Star quilt who thought yes was the only word she'd been given. Sad for Eli, too, and that's the part that took me the longest. Sad for Eli, who was 1920 and was handed a wife the way you're handed a plow, and was never told that the woman inside the wife had her own door, and that the door had a latch, and that the latch belonged to her. He wasn't a bad man. I need you to understand that. He didn't know. None of us did. The thing nobody tells you is that the silence has more than one victim. It just has one that gets named. I tried to explain it once to a woman I worked with at the diner. She was kind, she meant well, and I got about 3 sentences in before she said, "But you said yes, right?" And I said yes. And she said, "Then I don't really see the problem." And I smiled and refilled her coffee and walked into the back and stood next to the dish sink for a long time. That was the loneliness of being between 2 worlds. The world that hurt me couldn't see what it did, and the world that was supposed to be free couldn't see what I'd lost. I had grown a whole new vocabulary: consent, autonomy, coercion, bodily integrity, and there was nobody from my old life who would let me use those words near them, and nobody from my new life who understood why those words made me cry when I said them out loud. The community gave me real things, too. I have to say this part because it's true. There's the sound of horses at dawn, that soft chuffing breath through the nose, hooves on packed dirt, the harness chains clinking, and I have not heard it in 11 years, and I still hear it. There's the smell of bread from my grandmother's wood oven, the way the crust would crack when you pulled it out, and the steam would come up, smelling like wheat and smoke and Sunday. And there's my grandmother's hands, when she prayed before supper, the knuckles big from arthritis, the wedding band thin as a wire, the way she'd lay them palm down on the oilcloth like she was holding the table to the earth. Those are real. I am homesick for a place that hurt me. Both of those things are true at the same time, and I have stopped trying to make them not be. Here is the harm in one sentence. Silence dressed up as holiness. That's what it was. 5 words. Beauty and harm can live in the same house they lived in mine, and I won't pretend the house wasn't beautiful, and I won't pretend the beauty made the harm smaller. I'm building something now, a small life, a quiet one. I work in a bakery 3 days a week, and the owner is a woman named Joan who doesn't ask me questions I'm not ready to answer. I'm learning what my own yes sounds like and what my own no sounds like, and the difference is bigger than I knew a difference could be. Sometimes I drive past an Amish farm at dusk and I see a girl coming in from the line with a basket of clothes, and I do not hate her mother. I don't. I think that woman was a girl once, too. And somebody handed her 13 words. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, I see you. If you grew up in a place where the word no was a sin and the word yes was the only word you were given, I see you. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You are not broken. You were handed a script with half the pages torn out, and you read the part anyway. And the fact that you are here, listening to a stranger's voice on a screen, means some part of you went looking for the missing pages. That part of you is not lost. That part of you is the bravest part. To the one still inside, I am not asking you to leave. I am asking you to know your own name. To the one who left, the grief is the price, and the price is fair. To the one thinking about leaving, there is a library in every town, and the books are free. To the one who is married and just now realizing your body has always belonged to you, even when nobody told you. To the one who recognized herself 3 minutes ago, breathe. Just breathe. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this. If there was one sentence that landed somewhere tender, tell me which one. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell: the second inspection, what happened with Hannah, the night I left, but I'm getting closer. If you want to walk with me through those, this is Christina Amish Home, and the door is open. And to the members and the Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. Your body was always yours. Nobody had the right to forget that.